Hi everyone, and welcome to our SiGMA panel on fragmentation and federalization in Latin America and whether or not this is an obstacle to iGaming operations in the region. I'm here with Andre Faur from Game Plan, with Fernando Garita from BetCris, and Karen Sierra Hughes from GLI. And we'll be discussing today the various legal obstacles that operators can encounter and hopefully take some suggestions on how to make these better, to make the whole iGaming experience smoother in the region. I'm going to start with Karen today, since I'm sure being from one of the major technical labs in the region, I'm sure she experiences day-to-day questions regarding different technical requirements in each jurisdiction, especially obviously with regards to the regulated markets. From my experience with iGaming Colombia, from advising different B2B providers in this market, what we normally see is, okay, I've certified for the major markets. I have a B2B license in a major jurisdiction, but each time I make an update to my game, I have to go back and recertify from scratch. How do you think we can smoothen out this process for B2B providers, and what would be your suggestion in general to harmonize technical compliance across the board?
Thanks so much first to SiGMA for the invitation, and thank you, Michael, for moderating this panel today. Very happy to share it with Fernando and Andre. Well, when we talk about the technical compliance process, and I know the panel main focus is the federalization, no? Because of the challenges that also implies in a country or in a jurisdiction where you will see different local governments being the ones with the competence of gaming. It's really something that it's in the technical level, I believe that it's easier to achieve some type of homologation or harmonization in English, because really, when you look at technical requirements, you are looking at requirements that are addressed to software development, systems development that has very specific common background that you can use as reference. We really see, and this is something I want to share just as an example, there's about 500 jurisdictions regulated in the world, right? 300 of those has used the GLI standards as a reference to develop their requirements, or has adopted the GLI standards. No, as a lab, one other thing that we do is, in addition to certification, is develop technical requirements, standards that are publicly available for suppliers, for regulators, for governments. No, so that just gives you an idea of, yes, it's possible. No, there's always, of course, some very specific that changes, and sometimes very small things that changes jurisdictions from jurisdiction. Sometimes it's things related to the games. For example, the return percent to player may vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but in general, requirements are very similar. No, I can say also in terms of differences that can affect also technical standard certification process. Maybe it's also regulations that are not even related to gaming. Right? Maybe it's regulations that are regarding other type of industries. No, for example, in Colombia, well, we can't use Bitcoin, well, because Bitcoin is not a currency that is approved by the national banking regulatory or financial regulatory entity, right? So that limits how technology can be applied to gaming. No, but in terms of certification, as long as there's some type of base that is similar jurisdiction from jurisdiction, really the certification process is only updating the certification to the differences. And when we work with the industry, we really recommend for that approach. You know, there's no need to create the wheel again when there's things that are working so well in so many places in the world right now.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. On the Malta perspective, because it's also one of my jurisdictions, we've just regulated B2Bs, whereas previously you simply needed a certification. And now, since there's a large chunk of the European industry based in Malta, it's easier for B2Bs who are licensed to service more operator clients. Do you see an eventual B2B license happening in any of the jurisdictions in LATAM, Karen?
Well, that's something that is actually already happening, like not in all of them, because traditionally most of the Latin American jurisdictions did not require for suppliers to be licensed, not for B2 suppliers of gaming platforms or game content. But we see that jurisdictions that on the land-based side had been traditionally following a licensing process for B2Bs. It's happening. Like, for example, in the case of Argentina, right? The city of Buenos Aires, traditionally suppliers needed to be registered for land-based operations. Now for online, they are requiring the same. In addition to the certification process, you need to register as the supplier before the regulatory entity. Colombia doesn't do it, so that's an example of one that doesn't do it, but there is other jurisdictions that involve that part of the province of Buenos Aires also, no? That requires that type of regulation. For example, Peru, you heard about the projects of laws and the possibilities of online gaming being regulated there. Licensing of suppliers is in all the projects that have been discussed so far, because for land-based is a requirement, no? Panama, for example, I'm from Panama, so I have to talk about Panama. Panama also for land-based registration of suppliers, same for the recent approved regulation for online gaming in 2020. It's part of that, and it's something very recommended, because at the end, it's part of the operations, it's part of the industry, and there needs to be some type of background investigation or also responsibility, no, of the B2Bs before the regulator, no, not only the operator, no, at the end, no, that's what the objective of that is at the end.
So we've touched on the technical compliance side, and thank you very much for that, Karen. I'd like to turn to Fernando and hear about the operators and from Betcris's perspective, from having a multinational approach within Latin America. What kind of legal obstacles and regulatory obstacles are you facing, and how would you make the experience smoother if you could wave a magic wand and speak with the regulator and say, look, this is what we need to function better on a day-to-day basis?
Well, Michael, well, hi everyone. Nice to share one more time with you guys, Karen and Karen. Well, actually, from the perspective of the operator, for us, even in the case of Betcris, for years, when I remember when we started the process with Malta, 2006, 2007 was totally new for a company from Latin America, start to get in the process in a kind of regulation, you know. And well, from that moment, Betcris, as a brand, we decided to start to looking forward to be always in the regulation way, or looking for that kind of markets. And as Karen mentioned very well, it has to be a complete balance and a good approach between, first, get a good certification lab, choose the right one, you know, approach to the government, and try to work together. Here in Colombia, for example, there is a lot of, you know, interactive situation between operators, federations, and the companies. So I believe is from the operators, actually right now we are just looking to integrate different products, and one of the things we request already, so from some years ago, is so that platform or that product is certified or not, or so that is a huge and important thing. You know, the people they like that. So the customer, the final customer, they love to be in a platform, in the one they are sure they will be, you know, very safe and playing, get the aval of the country and everything. So from my perspective, is we, the operators, we don't have to wait until a regulation process showing up. We have to try to auto-regulate before that happens, not as a requirement, as a better situation for the in-house of the company. So it's my perspective from that one.
So it's the job of the operator, as I understand, to take a proactive rather than reactive approach, and be one step ahead of the law in the sense of defining the practices which then become regulated. I couldn't agree more. And I think that's what's happened in Colombia, what happened in Malta all those years ago, as you mentioned, and now what's slowly taking shape across Latin America. One country that is facing certain regulatory obstacles and has has created a lot of curiosity in the market is Brazil, just because of its sheer size. And we've been waiting for a harmonized and structured regulation, which unfortunately hasn't passed the hurdles of Parliament yet. And now I'm going to turn to Andrea and ask from the Brazilian perspective, what kind of regulatory obstacles are operators facing? What do you see in the market when you're advising your clients, and how would you make it better?
Well, the Brazilian scenario has always been quite a challenge for our industry. Before the current government, we had very strong progress on regulations and moving in the whole gaming structure and legislation through the parliament, and getting enough attention from the politics environment, from the government to that question. So there was a lot of investment, a lot of lobbying happening, which was a very positive scenario. So if we remember 2018, we were all very optimistic about Brazil. We said, well, it's going to happen anytime. We need to be there. And then government changed. And as of now, definitely, on top of the normal, difficulties of having, a new regulation go through the legislation and the whole structure of the government, all houses and all that. Now we have a government that has several different, even humanitarian issues happening in Brazil. So all those, all those efforts are kind of on standby from my perspective. So right now the Brazilian market is on hold, but at the same time, we see, and that's very important. That's key. We look at several different operators and platforms, and a lot of big brands in the gaming space, setting up operations in Brazil, using what I would call a gray area in our legislation, but this is something that will be fixed. I hope hopefully pretty soon, after 2022, after next year. Setting up at least their brands and setting up mind share over the public. So we see big brands sponsoring soccer teams, football teams. We see a lot of presence of even Betcris. We see branding happening in Brazil all over the place, which is key for those brands to establish themselves in such a huge market in Brazil. And as the situation is right now, it's even more challenging because the federal government is kind of detached from the 27 states governments. So right now there's kind of a war between the region governments towards the federal government. So it's not a very good time for kind of trying to talk about let's get federal, and that will happen on the states, and it's kind of rain down to all the Brazilian states, because if the government, if we do it right now, that won't happen. That won't happen. You have to go to the sole structure will happen in Brasilia. Then you're gonna have to talk to each one of the states, which is obviously incredibly challenging. So the idea is, I would say, it's being extremely smart for any brand wanting to get into the Brazilian market, which is massive, right? We're talking about almost 230 million people. We were talking about several at least $12 billion or more market waiting to happen. So it's waiting to to be pushed through. So it's very smart for the brands to get in the market, to localize their projects, to get ready, because the trend right now is for the situation that we have before the Bolsonaro government to get back into where it was right before the Bolsonaro government. Is very, at least for the surveys that are going right now, for the polls that are out right now, it's very unlikely that he will continue the government, that he'll be reelected. So it's very, very unlikely. So it's very likely that someone from probably, Lula or his candidate will get back into the government. And Lula, as we know, the Lula government was very, very keen to establishing a gaming, industry in the country. So that was moving very fast when he was in the government, or even Dilma was in the government. So we should expect that and get ready. So that's what I would say about, and that will happen on the federal level, and then it will rain down to the states as it should be. So, and obviously we're gonna get the best practices from around the world, and that's that's my take on the situation right now in Brazil. But it doesn't mean that we should be standing by as an industry. We should keep moving forward and preparing ourselves.
So definitely, there's this federalist approach, right? Brazil has kind of stalled what the industry has been waiting for, even though it should be happening sometime soon, and we hope that the political situation will change. As far as fragmentation is concerned, we're seeing different countries taking different approaches in LATAM. If you look at Colombia, for example, it's a very local gaming license where you can only onboard players who have a Colombian ID. If you look at what's proposed in Peru and what's happening in Panama, this is more of an international license, where as long as your operations are set in the country where you're licensed, there's no kind of restriction from the licensing country on taking players from other jurisdictions. And that's very similar to the Maltese and Curacao licenses, for example. So we're seeing these different mentalities and these different approaches being taken in LATAM. Karen, what are your views on this? And do you think that having a more structured international license would be more beneficial to the industry?
Well, I think just the same way that we were talking before about standards, right? And how they have to be some customization that applies to the jurisdiction. An international license, I don't see that happening. I mean, like there's so many different policy objectives, let's put it that way, for each of the countries in Latin America. Like you just mentioned Colombia, it's a jurisdiction that promotes the development of gaming, promotes the success of the operators, because they understand that monies will go to the government to go for health, support, etc. There's countries that only tolerates gaming. They are not there to promote it. They're tolerating it, and because of that, it's very restricted what is allowed and what is not allowed. Really the commercial impact that some decisions will take are not relevant or important to them. So in that same sense, licensing and international licensing process may differ a lot from country to country. We see jurisdictions where an online gaming license depends on the operator having a land-based license. That's a big restriction, right? A big difference when you think about the approach of other ones, where like Colombia is open, Panama is open, and some in Argentina are open too. In Mexico, it's open supposedly, but it's easier to do it through already a land-based operator, and that's just an example, on that sense. What you mentioned about the players also, from where the bets can be taken from. In terms of that and what's going to happen in Brazil, right? Or what's happening in Brazil and what's happening in Argentina, that's a big challenge, because how do you interpret where the bets are coming from, and how do you limit that jurisdiction border, right? Like in the case of Brazil, where we're seeing a lot of development on the lottery side, on the state government side. What is very clear from the federal government directive is that those bets will need to be restricted to their borders, right? So there needs to be actually a way to restrict, just like in the US. That's what happens here with geolocation, geofencing, whatever technology you have to use. But then in Argentina, where bets are supposed to be also, restricted to the jurisdiction, there's different interpretations on how that's going to happen, right? Either if you have a DNA, the registration, your national registration, or your domicile in the specific territory of the jurisdiction, or if it's really a territorial geographical fence, no? So international licensing is, I think, is the hardest part to achieve harmonization, both in the operator side and in the supplier side, because some also regulators don't think that suppliers are important in the equation, or they don't need to have that relationship with them for some reason. So that's a challenge.
If you take the situation in Europe as a comparison, 15 years ago, you'd have a Malta license, you'd be based in Malta, you'd operate using free movement of goods and services in the EU, and you'd be present to be operating in 28 countries from one centralized location, right? Now, over the past couple of years, each country is regulating, and that's causing over-regulation and fragmentation. So everybody seems to be waiting for legalization in different countries in Latin America, but this could also slightly backfire if there's a massive distance between the laws that are created and the taxation systems that are created. How would we solve this? As a closing remark, I want to ask our three panelists here, how would we solve this, and how would we create an ideal situation, if we had to be dreamers for 1 minute, to create a service offering and a legal offering where companies could operate freely and make as much revenues as possible at the end of the day. Let's start with the operator. Let's start with Fernando from Betcris.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Well, yeah, it's complicated. Even look at even in Europe, they are still changing and taking, some jurisdictions and promoting, take his own regulation in a formal way. 15 years ago to now is another story. We have to see what will be happening in the next, I believe, 5 years, because technically before, as Andre mentioned, so in the 2018 we were expected, and the companies, we moved to Brazil, start hiring some process people, be ready, to this will be happening right now. But look, it's a political thing too, so it's a matter, is very complicated, because we depend of the governments and we depend of the laws to be in the best way possible for the industry. Here, some companies and certification labs, from my side, they will be doing a great job, because they teach them the how to do it, what is the best way, with suggestions, recommendations, and everything. But yeah, for Latin America, I expect in the next 5 years will be a huge change, and all the politics and the government and regulators, they will be taking, to be on board in a regulation process in the formal way. Also, a huge challenge is the technology, as Karen mentioned before, the geolocation. So we need to find a way how the governments has to find a way how to go there, because we'll be with a good regulation, with geolocation, with technical, that will be help definitely the countries. And yeah, it's complicated. So from 15 for now, and now in the next 5, maybe, I don't know, there is some new products. There is the esports, they're showing up, they're starting, they're doing great. So look, it's a generation, it's a new generation of players, so we have to adapt to that.
Thank you, Fernando. And Andrea, what are your views on this?
So it's quite interesting. I would, when you said ideal, I start thinking, there's a common saying that says that a power only respects another power. So when we were talking, about getting, like an ideal scenario where regulations and we get things federalized and as less fragmented as possible. we as an industry, we need to come together as well. So we're talking about we're talking a lot about the government, the things that needs to be happening on the other side, on the people that needs the things that need to happen. But on this side, from the standpoint of the industry stakeholders, there is a need of I'd say a Latin American organization, an organization that will come together and get support from all the companies. That is, in my humble opinion, will be the only way that you can actually approach governments with enough power, enough knowledge and success cases to show, hey, if we standardize some of the things, you don't need to do everything, but if we standardize at least the basis of operations across Latin America, you tap, you can reach like 3, 4, 5-fold the business that we have right now, because we keep fighting like small battles, and mostly winning them. But at the same time, there's this big battle that that would be great to be fought if we come together as an industry into all together and talk directly with the governments, and then you have enough power to come and actually talk to the ministries and actually talk to the right politicians that will make things move forward, instead of just I have the support of this deputy and that deputy, and they don't talk to each other, and then you have like fragmented laws and state laws that doesn't talk to to the federal laws. So, and it's a big mess. And I say that as as a Brazilian. So my company, we have a couple bases around the world, but the Brazilian entity, we pay nothing less than 18 different taxes. 18 different taxes. You have an idea. We have to really, we need someone fully dedicated to actually sort out what the hell we need to pay to the government or not. What are the credits? It's completely insane. So this is the situation that we don't want. We want the opposite. So, and I think we need to come together as an industry. That's my point of view.
Karen, I'm seeing you nodding in approval there. Do you have any closing comments to make on this point?
I'm a kind of revolutionary guy, so
No,
I like revolutions.
I love what Andres said about getting together in an international association. That's so hard. It's even harder internally in some countries. In some countries, there are 2, 3 association of operators and they fight each other. So imagine in an international, it will be awesome. I mean, like we just have the example of IAGA, International Association of Gaming Regulators, where operators and suppliers are also members, associate members, etc. But they have for example, a licensing form that is presented to their members for operators and for the industry that wants to adopt it. So that's a great result of a collaboration between several countries and jurisdictions. You have to pick your battles. I'm listening to Andre because there's things that you just can't win, right? But let's say international liquidity. Everybody talks about that and how we're going to shift that, right? Some countries in Europe were able to do it, but I'm sure they sit down and review their requirements, their regulations, and how they were similar in things that are really critical when you are going to allow something like that. But we need to have a table where to sit. And unfortunately, I don't think in gaming, in Latin America, there's that table. I mean, there's a table that we put together every year, the regulators roundtable, but it's not the same as having an organization that actually is the objective is that achieving harmonization at some stage.
Thank you everyone for your insights. I'll just close off by saying moving towards a system of mutual recognition between countries, which is supposed to be what's going on in the EU, even though we're also seeing fragmentation here. I think the end goal should be some sort of mutual recognition, and that would make the overall experience smoother so that operators can make revenues and at the end of the day, pay taxes. Hopefully not 18 types of taxes, but taxes. Thank you all for your time. It's been great, and I hope to see you all soon in person.